Friends, welcome to this last Ventures course of this academic session. I am delighted that you are here, and we may be small in number because of other scheduling conflicts, but we're mighty. I'll be recording this for people that were not able to make it, but registered and so wanted to be part of the recording, which is also to say, we're going to invite you to be as interactive as usual and sharing stories, but it also means remember that this will be posted publicly. So just have an awareness of what you share. If it's something that is too tender to put into a public kind of space, then perhaps it would be best to not share here, but we'll be able to have other kinds of times when we can talk with Jeanne. And actually, after the course is over, Jeanne has offered to hang around for a few more minutes. And so those will be times if there's something that's personal that you don't want public, but you still want to be able to ask Jeanne, you'll have that opportunity. But speaking of Jeanne, let me introduce Jeanne and this course of A Place for Everyone, Creating Communities of Belonging. So Jeanne Davies serves as the executive director for Anabaptist Disabilities Network. She's ordained in the Church of the Brethren, has an M.Div from Bethany Theological Seminary, and a GC in Homiletic Peer Coaching from Vanderbilt Divinity School, and a GC in Disability and Ministry from Western Theological Seminary in Holland, Michigan. Jeanne has a passion for disability advocacy and inclusion and believes that the whole church benefits when all of the members of the body are actively connected. Jeanne, those are some impressive credentials, and I'm glad that that gives us just a little window. Feel free to share more, but at this point, I just want to turn it over to you and let you take the course wherever you want to take it.
Thank you, Enton, and I hope that you all will feel free to both ask questions, share a story, share a comment. And again, I want to say, Anton talked about confidentiality, and also if the story's not yours to share, right? That's something to consider also in this public forum. Let's get started here. I'm going to share my PowerPoint here.
Looks good, Jeanne. We're seeing it really well.
I am not, but okay.
You just need to click the show your screen up above.
Oh, right, here we go. There we go.
Got it. That's what rehearsal is good for.
Now I have it. I can see both my PowerPoint and all of you. So thank you all for being here. I know it's a Saturday. Thank you for spending 3 hours of your Saturday with me. I really appreciate it. We're going to start out with just sensing the temperature of the room, where everybody is. So which dog are you today? How are you feeling this morning? Anyone can chime in. How do you
All
feel?
right, I'm going to say I'm number 2.
Number 2. Number 2 looks a little tired.
Yep.
Mhm.
I think I'm number 6 right now.
Number 6, happy.
I feel like I might be number 5.
Number 5.
Although
Although what?
can I really quickly interrupt?
Yes.
For this. Oh. Can you see her?
Hi.
She looks like that dog. So that might be why I'm number 5.
I see. Okay. Anyone else?
I think I'll be number 3.
Number 8.
Number 3. Okay. Did I hear a number 8?
Yes, number 8.
Okay, we are praying for you, sister.
Exhausted.
Exhausted. I think I'm actually number 4 today. I'm just glad to be here with you all. Yeah.
And
I-
Eric added in that he's number 6.
Was that Philip or Eric?
Eric.
Eric is number 6. All right. Well, we'll do our best to meet everyone where they are today. And if you need to take a break at any time and turn your camera off and walk away and get a drink of water or stretch your legs or take a mental break, please take care of yourself. I'm going to start out with a little statistics. The prevalence of disability in the United States, 25% of adults in the United States have a disability. And interestingly, in rural areas, the percentage is higher, 33%. There's some speculation why that is. It could be more physical labor in rural areas. It could be access to healthcare. It could be for a variety of reasons. But it's slightly higher in rural areas. 8.6% of children have a developmental disability, and 25% of households in the United States have a disabled family member in them. So we all have disabled families and individuals in our churches. This is very prevalent. Often people have hidden disabilities. So if you don't see people with disabilities in your church, it may be that they have a disability that they simply have not disclosed to you. The Americans with Disabilities Act was passed in 1990, and that ensured that all of our public buildings and sidewalks and public institutions, such as libraries and schools, things like that, government buildings, every building has to be accessible to people with disabilities. And so, we had Title IX and children with disabilities in schools. We had curb cuts and building modifications to allow people with disabilities to have access. However, the church petitioned to be exempted from the Americans with Disabilities Act. So the church was exempted. They said it would be too much of a financial hardship and a burden on the church. So we have been exempted from any legal requirement whatsoever to be accessible with disabilities, with the exception of employment. Still have to provide equal opportunities for people with disabilities in employment. But otherwise, there's no reason legally why the church has to be accessible to people with disabilities at all. So that is in part why Anabaptist Disabilities Network exists, my organization, to help the church become more accessible to people with disabilities, because we are lagging behind secular institutions. Did you have a comment or a question?
Question, is it just when you say the church, does that mean just the Church of the Brethren, or does that mean the wider church?
All religious institutions and organizations.
Thank you.
So that would include, synagogues and Muslim organizations as well. So all religious organizations were exempted. But
Would that also mean, like, with us having an annual conference, the area we have it, that it would, if we have a conference that doesn't have the accessibility for the disabled?
yeah, well, a public building, a conference center, would be under the regulations of the American with Disabilities Act. So they should be accessible to people with disabilities, right? But it wouldn't be because of us, it would be because the conference center itself, the laws apply to them. So I just want to say, noting this, that I think the Americans with Disabilities Act is a low bar, right? The church should be leading the way, in my opinion, in including people with disabilities. So we can do better. Let's talk a little bit about what is disability. And I'd like to hear from you. Where did we get our ideas about disabilities? When did you learn about disability? And what did you learn? You think back to when you were a child, or maybe you didn't learn until you were older, until you were an adult, didn't have a lot of exposure. I'm interested to hear how you learned about disability.
Well, I can say I'm a public school teacher. And so I've learned quite a bit about disability or ability in different ways, depending on how it is defined.
My first introduction was when I was about 3 years old, and I can just vaguely remember one of my best friends was a little older than me, but he was deaf. And I think he must have had some other disabilities too. He was very active, and I remember uh, adults having to quiet him down. But but I thought he was really a neat guy, and that was my first introduction to disabilities. And evidently, my parents uh, had taught me at the same time about patience with someone, but he was just like the rest of us, except for this disability and his overactivity. So my biggest interest started when we were living in Kansas, and I was not on the teaching staff, but my license had run out in Kansas, and but I was able to substitute, and I love substituting in the junior senior high school special education department. I just loved those kids, and had thought if I go back and renew my teaching certificate, I'd like to change my major from music to special education, because just fell in love with those kids.
Thanks, Sharon. Steve?
I I'm getting a reverberation. Are you when I speak?
Steve, you're logged in twice. There's another device under Jane Stone, and so you need to turn that off or log that out. That's what's causing the reverb.
How do I do that?
I can do that for you. Hang on.
Okay.
Success. You should be fine now.
Okay. I am chaplain at a place here in Lexington called Participation Station. It's a peer-operated center for people with disabilities, for people with disabilities. And by that, we're talking about mental disabilities. And so many of our participants are receiving disability, and what we don't have healthcare professionals on our staff. What we every day, people with a disability will do what we call a track, which is a 45-minute session. I have one every week called the Chaplain's Corner. Other people do them on African American history, on all kinds of topics. And we tell people it's not good to isolate at home. You should be out engaged with other people. And so we have a regular office building with a crafts room, a meditation room, a lounge where we meet every day of the week.
Steve, did any of your ideas change about disability is serving in this role as chaplain?
Well, I'm not sure this is a direct answer to you. I am bipolar myself. I often say that I would not have the ministry I have if I didn't have the diagnosis that I have. And years ago, I got good training for what I do. At Prairie View Psychiatric Hospital in Newton, Kansas, I did 3 units of CPE, which was 1,200 hours training in psychiatric chaplaincy. So I've been at it a long time. Certainly, one thing, and I tell people the bad news is there's no cure. The good news is it's manageable. And I have successfully managed it. I've earned 3 master's degrees. And so it's hard to tell me how my thinking's evolved over the years, but certainly the fact that I have my own diagnosis has impacted how I interact with others.
Thanks, Steve, for sharing.
My first example of it was when I was in elementary school. I was in a small school because it was a small town. And we had a high school student who was obviously disabled. And he was from the Amish community. And so that was my first exposure to it. I think he went on to graduate and all of that. And then another one was as a pastor, I went to a church where there was a young man about my age who obviously had a mental disability of sorts. And here I was, not even in seminary yet, trying to figure out how do I help him. Mostly I ended up helping his mother because she was beside herself in having to deal with her college-age son, who was, she said was schizophrenic. I thought was maybe something else. But at any rate, that's just the beginning of a long story, what I won't go into. But that's been my experience with forms of disability.
Thank you, Philip.
I have a more personal experience concerning the disabilities. Is our oldest son was born with classical hemophilia, and it was severe. And he grew up with friends that were always there to help him but we had like our high school was 3 stories old building, and when he had bleeding internal bleeding in his joints and his legs, he had to be on crutches, and his friends would help him get up and down the stairs even with crutches, and that was, we had a lot of help that way with teachers and friends and in a small community. Another kind of side effect of that with the hemophiliacs is that sometimes they kind of cycles, and sometimes they're just not very clear-minded, and they appear to be just looking out the window or, just a little slow. And other times they're really quick to respond to the classroom and what's going on. And that was difficult for a couple of the teachers to understand, thinking he just wasn't paying attention when it was a part of the physical problem with the hemophilia. And I'm not sure what caused that, and I'm not sure the specialists know, except that our doctor worked with several hemophiliacs, and nationwide, that was one of the symptoms that we all experienced with the hemophilia. So there's those kinds of part of the handicap that's not well known and not really well noticed, along with the physical handicap.
Thanks, Sharon. Does anyone else want to say?
I,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry,
No, good.
I was waiting to make sure other people got a chance to talk. Um, so I don't remember when I was first exposed to the idea of disability. My dad was a pastor, so he was in seminary when I was born, and I've met tons of people, camp and events, and so like disability, I don't remember when, but I did work at a year-long camp. It was open all year for adults and children with disabilities, of all kinds of disabilities. And it was so rewarding to see people who had different challenges in life and figure, like, it was rewarding to figure out how to let them have the same experience, even though they might have a severe limitation to being able to do it. It was incredible. And I myself am disabled. I have a variety of chronic conditions that make it really hard to walk and be physical. And I have a service dog who you met. So yeah, disability is bread and butter in my life.
Thanks. I'm just going to note too, for those of us who went to school before 1990, those of us who were in public school before 1990, before the ADA was passed, we didn't have many disabled children in our classrooms. That was not typical. So because of the ADA, a lot of the younger generations have grown up with children who are disabled in their classrooms. And so older folks, such as myself, are a little more uncomfortable with being with disabled people. Don't quite know how to respond, don't quite know how to act, because we're a little less familiar. We just haven't had the same kind of contact. We didn't grow up with disabled kids in our classrooms. So I'm going to move on here unless somebody has something pressing to say. Okay. There we go. Disability is a broad topic, so I have a lot of material. We may not get through it all, but I'll do my best. Autism, deafness, hardness of hearing, dementia, mobility, immune disorders, mental illness, low vision, all kinds of things. It covers a lot of territory. The definition from the World Health Organization of disability is that disability is neither purely a biological nor a social construct, but the result of interactions between health conditions and environmental and personal factors. Disability can occur at 3 levels: an impairment in body function or structure, a limitation in activity, such as the inability to read or move around, and a restriction in participation, such as exclusion from school or work. So it's complicated. It's an interaction of multiple factors. So what kinds of things would you say are disabling? I'm going to stop my share here so we can see each other. What kinds of things would you say are disabling?
Anything that limits someone's ability to experience the world fully.
Anything that limits someone's ability to experience the world fully. Anyone else? What kinds of things are disabling?
I was thinking in terms of more categorical, like a physical, um, or mental or emotional. I mean, all those kind of things. And being in this context, I'd also add spiritual. So disabilities can be all of those different parts.
Harriet? Saw you
I
unmute.
was going to agree with what Ann said, the part about just physically being able to not get or do something, but then also the ability thought process that keeps you from being fully a part of everything else, whether it's because of perception and processing, or because you're just are not included.
It strikes me that this is often in relation to other people, because if everyone had the same limitation, we wouldn't consider it a limitation.
Oh, go ahead.
Where I work, we hosted a vocational training program for post-high school students that would still receive supports until age 21. So we would see the physical, those who had cerebral palsy, but even some who just had emotional issues that made it difficult for them to relate to the world around them, probably coming out of histories of abuse or something like that, or, being born drug addicted or what have you. So there's those unseen disabilities that we don't always think of.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint here and talk about different models for disability. Hang on. Okay. There are different models of disability, of understanding what disability is. So I often use the story from John 5 about the man by the pool of Bethesda, the healing pool, to talk about these different models. In that story, there's a man that's lying by the healing pool, and he's been lying there for 38 years. And the deal with the pool was when the water stirred, you had to get to the pool as quickly as possible. You had to get in the pool while the water was stirring, and the first person in the pool when the water was stirring would be healed of their impairment. So people came, hundreds of people from all over, but to this pool to try to be healed. This man had been lying by the pool for 38 years, and Jesus sees him, and because he's Jesus, knows how long he's been lying there, and asks him, "Do you want to be made well?" And the man says, I can't get to the pool in time. Somebody always pushes ahead of me. So Jesus says, "Take up your mat and walk." And the man takes up his mat and he walks. So in the medical model of disability, the problem that the man has is that he can't walk. He just can't get to the pool fast enough. He has mobility impairment, and so he's not able to get there. In the medical model, there is something wrong in the person. The problem is located in the person with the disability. So you can't hear, or you can't see, or you're not able to walk. You lack social skills, whatever it is. And so the solution to that is some kind of treatment, some kind of medication, some aid like a crutch or glasses or a hearing aid, some kind of therapy, some kind of surgery. So that is the medical model of disability. The concern with the medical model of disability is that that is something that we refer out for, right? That's not something that we take on ourselves as helping. We locate the problem in the person, and the person has to go somewhere else to have that taken care of. And that's something that they need to fix themselves. Now, there might be times when a referral is helpful. When might a referral be helpful? When would we send somebody outside the church for a concern, a disability concern?
I'd say when you need resources or access to resources that aren't available.
That's good. Yeah, when you need access to resources that aren't available. I would also say maybe in the case of when you need expertise that's not available.
I would add when there is something known outside that has a significant promise of making a very helpful difference in someone's life.
And of course, we know we refer for mental health counseling, right? For we don't try to take that on ourselves if we're not qualified. We refer out if we feel that someone is in danger. Those are situations where we would refer out. But for the most part, I'm going to talk about what we can do as a church to support people with disabilities. So, and for that, I'm going to talk about the social model of disability. And in the social model of disability, it is not the person's impairment that is disabling. It is the social environment that's created. It's the environment that was created that is not welcoming, that is not accessible to them. So I have a few examples here. If you can see, oh, I'm in front of that sign. Let me see if I can move my head. There we go. If you can see there in the lower left corner, there's a sign. This was at a Mennonite convention, and at a nearby restaurant, there was a lunch counter. And the lunch counter was high enough that if you were sitting in a wheelchair, you would not be able to be seen by the person who was serving behind the counter. So they painted this sign on the side of the countertop that said, "Need assistance? Ring." Except there's one problem. There is no bell. The bell was ripped off. So no way to ring for service, and the person behind the counter would not be able to see you because you might be able to shout or something. But so this is an example of the problem here in the restaurant is not that the person is using a wheelchair. The problem is that this system is set up so that that person can't get service, right? In our story of, oh, let's see if I can point. No. There we go. No, I can't. Can I, Anton? I got a small little window here. Up in the other corner is our man by the pool of Bethesda. And I just want to say right here that, and now that if you have a healing pool where the water angel stirs the water and you have hundreds of people crowded around there and you have to be, and they're blind and they are mobility impaired and all sorts of other impairments, and you have to be the first to get in the water when the angel stirs the water, and then you get healed. That is a crummy model for a healing pool. So I think Jesus sees that and says, take up your mat and walk. I mean, sometimes it's easier to do crisis intervention than to change a flawed system. Just a couple other examples. When we have gluten-free communion bread, then we allow communion for people who have celiac disease or gluten intolerance. During the Reformation, praise be to God, the scriptures were translated into the vernacular, into the common language, so that everyone had access to the scriptures, except for people who can't read. So our worship is more and more text-based, whether it's on a screen or in a hymnal or in a bulletin. People who can't read don't have full access to the worship. So that is the social model of disability, which locates the disabling factor in our social structures, which are not set up to include everyone. So I might just hop on by here and talk about Jesus and assessing value in the church, just because I have a lot of content and I'm realizing my time is ticking by. So just a little talk about how Jesus assesses people's value versus how we assess people's value in the church. The scriptures point out again and again that Jesus reaches out to the margins. Zacchaeus come down from that tree, looking for the lost sheep, looking for the lost coin. The woman who anoints Jesus's feet and before his crucifixion at that dinner, and then wipes them with her hair. Just absolutely scandalous, right? But Jesus is always reaching out to people who are on the margins. And in fact, the children, I imagine this kind of wild and woolly gatherings, right? When Jesus was preaching, and people just gathered from all around to come hear him, and they brought food and they brought their kids, and I'm sure it was not totally sanitary. And the kids are being disruptive, right? And so the disciples say, "Get these kids out of here." And Jesus says, "No." Jesus centers the kids. "Bring them to me." So, so Jesus is always centering people on the margins. In terms of value and people, we have this lovely model from Paul of the body of Christ. And in the body of Christ, each person, every single member is important. Each member has a place, a unique place in the body of Christ that is shaped just for them. And we miss them when they're gone. And so the more people that we add to the body of Christ, the more we experience its fullness. And Paul also talks about outliers in the body of Christ, people on the margins. He says the people who have the least respect in our culture should get the most respect in the church. And why is that? I believe that that's because we already know what the people who have power think. We already know the conventional wisdom. We already know the wisdom that the leaders have. Where will we get the wisdom to grow? We'll get it from people who are usually unheard and unseen and not valued. So when we think about centering people on the margins, right? Hello, Winnie. Anton's got little Winnie there. When we think about centering people on the margins, what concerns do you have when you think about that? And what blessings might we receive? Why might that be difficult to center people on the margins? Or we could even talk about what that means if you're unclear about what that means. And what blessings might we receive from that?
Well, I'm first going to talk about what blessings. Henry Nouwen's a theologian who's written the book, The Wounded Healer. And we know often that people, if they don't have a disability themselves, maybe they have a family member, a brother, a sister who does, and that sensitizes us to the problem. It's interesting that the person who founded clinical pastoral education, Anton Boysen, he had a diagnosis himself and considerable graduate education, and so if you had to walk the walk as well as talk the talk, you have a unique understanding of the disability, and it often leads people to assist others.
I think often there is this almost push for people who are disabled to have to be exceptional in some other way in order to be centered. So you have it's like someone who has autism perhaps being only centered because they are brilliant at something, or someone mobility challenged having some other incredible talent, and that's how those people get centered. But it's really difficult, I feel like, to figure out how to center people who don't have such loud and expressive forms of brilliance, even though they have something. Everybody has some form of brilliance, but some are harder to see.
Thank you. Anton?
Yeah, it strikes me that we learn a lot from those who are on the margins that help us follow where Jesus calls us, which is why Jesus really worked at centering. There are things that those who have privilege or at the core who don't struggle with the same things learn. And that's why the whole strong movement in today's society feels so troubling to me, because it feels like we're intentionally trying to further marginalize the marginalized these days. And it will impoverish all of us as that process continues, by only allowing those who are in the center to be in their own echo chamber.
I feel a blessing because I have somebody in my church, and the blessing that I felt that came from it, when she was talking about autism and not being able to find, the gifts or the specialities of it. The blessing is when you do. When you take the time to sit with the person and talk with the person, and you make them the center that they have, by just talking to them, associating with them, just listening. Because sometimes just by the listening is how we can are able to see what gifts, just like everybody else. We all have gifts in some way, but centering around them and talking to them and listening pulls out the gifts that they never knew they actually had. And when somebody can do that for them, I think that's such a blessing, because you can see the excitement, the enthusiasm of, well, they never thought of that, but you've seen that.
Thanks, Dawn. I'm just going to point out on this model here. So we want to center people on the margins, but part of doing that means we need to move out. We need to maybe be a little more quiet ourselves and amplify others' voices, right? We can't just depend on people at the margins to move in, but we also need to decenter ourselves. Okay, I'm gonna just talk about, tell two stories quickly. Let's see where we are here. Oh, good, we're right on time. Hooray. Um, two stories about gifts. Leslie Nugent is pastor, or was pastor. She started a church or a worshiping community called Parables in Wayzata, Minnesota at the United Church of Christ there. And oh, my head is in front of her name. Can't get there. Okay, her name is Leslie Nugent. Let me see if I can. There we go. Her name is Leslie Nugent, and here she is with her Parables congregation, which is part of the Wayzata Community Church in Wayzata, Minnesota. This is a church that is for people who have intellectual disabilities or autism. They are people for whom a typical worship service does not work. And it's a worship service that is for them and for their families. And it's what I had a little new church start for a while called Parables, and it was modeled after Leslie's ministry. The reason Leslie has a disabled son, but that's not why she started the ministry. In fact, she didn't think she wanted to do that since she did spend a lot of time caring for her disabled son. But she was sitting in worship. Wayzata is a big community, worship service of about 1,000 people. She was sitting in worship one Sunday morning, and it was during the sermon. And there was a little boy there that was in a wheelchair. And in the middle of the sermon, the boy started singing, "Jesus Loves Me." Nobody was particularly upset by this, as we probably wouldn't be upset by that. But the father was concerned that people would not be able to hear the sermon or that he would be disruptive. And so he took the wheelchair and wheeled his son out of the sanctuary into the narthex. And Leslie was sitting in worship and thought, the holiest thing that happened in this worship service just got ushered out the door. And instead of, inviting those holy moments to leave, how can we lift them up and celebrate them instead? So she started this worship ministry in order to embrace those holy disruptions, in order to free up the social norms so that people could celebrate fully in worship. And that ministry still goes on. In Wayzata, Leslie is no longer the pastor there, but she is the founding pastor of that. Another story, Ann Hamlin. Ann's dad is a member of the Church of the Brethren, and her mom is Catholic. Ann is autistic. She's a young adult, and she has a blog. She writes often for Anabaptist Disabilities Network, and she also writes songs. You're going to hear one a little bit later. And Ann did not speak, did not communicate until she was about 18 years old, until she was able to use a talking device. She now uses a talking device. So she wrote an article for us in which she said, I talked to God all the time when I was growing up because I couldn't speak to anyone else. Wherever I went, and she said, I spent a lot of time waiting. So in doctor's waiting room, therapy waiting rooms, right? Wherever I went, I was talking to God because I couldn't talk to anybody else. Which led me to wonder, what could we learn from someone who spent the first 18 years of their life literally praying without ceasing? I just wonder. She's a gift. You'll enjoy her song later. All right, Anton, I'm gonna maybe take that little break a couple minutes early. That's okay with you? Anybody, are we all ready for maybe a 5-minute break? Get up, stretch your legs, take a drink of water.
Yeah, let's make sure there's not any final questions.
Oh, yeah, do you have questions? I'm here for your questions or your comments or your stories.
But I'm not seeing anyone jump to share that. So, Jeanne, if you stop sharing, I'll put a 5-minute timer up, and then we can. I'd invite you to get up, stretch, because part of what this particular course is paying attention to is how we take care of ourselves and each other. So, take a 5-minute break, make use of it, and we'll come back at whatever time zone you're in, right at the top of the hour. How's that? Good. See you all
See you
soon.
in a little bit. And we're back.
Great. I think we've got a few people still coming, but Jeanne, why don't we go ahead and start, and we'll catch them up as we go.
Give me time to reshare here. Okay. Sarah Mason asked a question about Anne Hamlin, and so I'm going to answer here in the whole chat.
Instead of chatting, Jeanne, just share it with us.
Sure, but I'm going to put the link for our website.
Excellent.
Oh, I serve an organization called Anabaptist Disabilities Network. We're a parachurch organization that serves congregations and larger church bodies to support them to be more accessible to and welcoming to people with disabilities. And that is a link to our website. So if you search Anne Hamlin's name on there, you'll find some posts. Not all of the posts, because we're still migrating. We just got developed a new website, so we haven't migrated all of our content yet, but there are a few posts there. And she also has a blog. And so if you click on one of her posts on our website, in her bio, in her biography, there will be a link to her blog. So. Okay, so when we think about our social model of disability, we think about disability inclusion and how do we remove barriers to access? How do we create communities that are more accessible to people with disabilities? So I'm just going to run through some typical disabilities and what we might do to increase access. So the most common disability by far is mobility, impairment in mobility. This is the most common disability for older adults. And some things that we can do, build ramps, right? Have elevators, make our buildings accessible, particularly ramps also up to the leadership area, right? What does it say if we don't have access to leadership, to the space that we accord leadership, right? If that's not accessible to someone who is mobility impaired. Accessible washrooms, of course, we must have accessible washrooms. You can't really expect someone to come to gathering, right, to travel and not be able to use the bathroom. Doors, push button doors. You can have doors with lever handles that are easier to open. Those are good. Even better are push button doors to the outside or push button doors to the bathrooms. If you have a handle, it's pretty impossible to open up a door and get your wheelchair through. You still would need somebody to help you get through the door. So for full independence, if you have push button doors, that is the gold standard. That said, if we have a system, if we have a flawed system, if we're not able to have push button doors, we should at least have people at the door ready to open that for people, right? We can overcome flawed systems, right, by intervening with people. And of course, accessible parking, accessible entrances to your building, lifts, elevators, those kind of things. For low vision, we've commonly used low print materials. I would encourage you to buy large print Bibles, large print materials, large print hymnals. But I would also add that most of the people who need large print materials are older, and those books are heavy. That large print hymnal is heavy. So I am all for not violating copyright, right? So I do think that you should buy those hymnals, buy those Bibles. But I also think if you photocopy it for one use and then shred it, right, it will be easier for people to use those. More and more commonly, people with low vision are using tablets. So they can increase the size of the font or change the font or increase the contrast so that they can see. So if you can email the content of your bulletin or hymn lyrics to people with low vision for use on their screen readers. We do that at Anabaptist Disabilities Network. We do that at annual conference. Transcribe all of the worship into an accessible document and email it to people for use with their tablets or screen readers. So sending digital materials is more and more common for people with low vision. And there's nothing to say that you couldn't have a tablet or two, right, to provide for people for use during worship or a meeting. Blindness, which is different from low vision, and often people who are completely blind, particularly if they've been blind from birth, or even acquired blindness, actually, over time. Many learn to read Braille. So some signs that are especially important are exits, right? Emergency exits, and restrooms. So if you're just going to put up a few Braille signs, having your where are the bathrooms, right? You can also orient someone who's blind to your building. Again, I do that at annual conference. Take people around for a little tour, right? Where is everything? Pretty good. Blind people are pretty good at mapping things in their head because they do it all the time. So if you walk them through the whole area and say that here's where this is, here's where this is, you know, you have to take the elevator to get to this place, right? They will map it in their head. So you can orient someone to your building. Here's where the sanctuary is. Here's where the bathrooms are. You know, here's where the classroom is. When you're talking with blind people, you should introduce yourself, right? Hey, you know, Dave, it's Jeanne. How are you doing? Right? Because they can't see you. Also helpful if somebody else walks up, greet them by name, right? Oh, hey, hi, Tom, right? So that they know another person just walked up. It's Tom. You can describe things as needed. Describe what's happening as needed. Say you're in worship and there's a skit, and what's happening in the skit is largely visual. You might want to help them see that by describing it. Trying to think of other tips for talking. Don't assume they need help. They may not, but ask. Can I help you in some way? What would be helpful? Right. And they can tell you yes or no, and what exactly would be helpful. Oh, I should say with the mobility, don't ever grab someone's wheelchair ever without their permission, right? And wheel them somewhere. Same thing with blind people, don't steer them if they didn't ask for that, right? Generally good not to physically touch people without invitation. Yeah. If you have, oh, I must have put this in the wrong place. Oh, no, I didn't. The screen. I wondered why I put that screen there. The welcome screen, the screen for worship, right? Welcome, you're glad you're here. It says on that, on this particular one. Read the words, right? If you're a worship leader and there's words on the screen, read them. And again, electronic documents. You can send a blind person an electronic document and they can use it with a screen reader, and they can either hear it through headphones or it will come out in Braille on their computer. And you can see there's a little Braille thing right here on the computer, right? So they're reading that. They can read that. And they can follow along in worship, so they can read the hymn lyrics and sing with everyone. Hardness of hearing. Oh, interesting. I put the same slide up. Don't know why I did that, but it's interesting. When you're talking to somebody who's hard of hearing, face them. They need to see your mouth. Don't put your hand up like this. Don't be talking to them like this if they're over there. Look at them directly and try to move your mouth, right? So they can see your lips. Use the microphone. How many times have we been in a meeting where somebody says, well, I don't need the microphone, right? People feel self-conscious about having their voice amplified. However, someone in the room is probably not going to hear them. And the hard thing is there's stigma, right? With being hard of hearing, there's stigma with having a disability. So people often will not tell you they can't hear. They will just be frustrated. So always use the mic in every possible situation. Just raising your voice doesn't do the job. Closed captioning, if you have video, right? I'm imagining many of you are now streaming your worship services. It's really relatively easy to turn on closed captioning for streaming your video. You know, it's not the greatest in the world, but it's better than nothing, right? The automatic closed captioning. It's much better than not having closed captioning at all. And it's just really a click of the button. Audio assistive devices. There are various kinds of audio assistive devices now. And there are some now that most churches use radio frequency transmitters. And you can get headsets with that, but now you can also get little necklaces that feed into people's hearing aids, right? That can be helpful, especially because often their hearing aids, they can change settings, right? They can turn up the volume. There are some other technologies. Bluetooth is a little less useful. There's audio induction loops. That's the most expensive option and probably the best, which is a wire that goes around the perimeter of your sanctuary, and that picks up the audio feed from your sound system and feeds it directly into people's hearing aids. And for people who don't use hearing aids, you know, again, you can get receivers for those, but again, that's the most expensive option, but still just so you know, there are lots of different options now for audio assistive devices. If you have audio assistive devices and you haven't tested them, test them. Often we have them and people don't use them because they don't actually really work that well. So you may need to update. Just make sure that you have tested them. Deafness, this is a tricky one. So for people who are deaf, meaning they have little to no hearing and they use American Sign Language, right? It's a whole different culture, right? There's a deaf culture. American Sign Language is a language. It's not just a translation, like not just a one-to-one direct translation from English. It's a completely different language. So they speak ASL, and it's good to have ASL interpretation in your congregation if you have a guest who is deaf, or certainly a member who is deaf and who speaks ASL. Most of us don't have people who are deaf and speak ASL in our congregations, unfortunately. But I went back and forth because I do consulting with congregations on accessibility about, you know, should you have an ASL interpreter, right? They're hugely expensive. They're very expensive. And it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to have an ASL interpreter if you don't have anyone who speaks ASL in the congregation, right? So I asked a woman who is a professor of ASL and who's done a lot of advocacy work in the church. She started a deaf summer camp at her church. And she said, I think maybe relationship has to come first, right? Create a relationship with a deaf community, you know, in your community that would like to come to church. Because part of coming to church is not just going to the worship service, right? It's interacting with other people after worship, during coffee hour, during Sunday school, whatever, right? So she said, it's good if you have like a little community, invite a little community of deaf people to your church, and then have an ASL interpreter, right? And then they have community of people to talk with after church, right, in ASL. So anyway, large gatherings, absolutely, should have an ASL interpreter and be welcoming to deaf people. The deaf community is, there are some deaf churches. There is one, sorry, it's escaping me. There is one deaf congregation in the Church of the Brethren, and the name of it is escaping me. It might come to me later, but anyway, but there aren't many, and deaf people are largely not, I hate to say this because I don't know this. This is an assumption, but I think this is true, that they are largely unchurched for this reason, right? Yeah, the language barrier. So this is a growing edge if someone feels called. This is a growing edge for the church. Oh, and deafness is D with a capital D. And they prefer identity first language. A deaf person, I am deaf, right? Not a person with deafness, not a person who's hard of hearing. I am deaf. And they use a capital D, which indicates that they're part of deaf culture and that they use American Sign Language. Oh, Sarah has a raised hand.
I do. I didn't want to interrupt your wonderful presentation, Jeanne, but I am definitely learning more about deafness and trying to figure out ways that we could involve individuals in annual conference. Is there such things as a deaf community choir or songs that are sung? Would that be something that would be more offensive, or would it be more inclusive?
Yeah, I feel like you don't want it to just be performative, right?
Right.
That's why I think I love that Sherry said start with relationship, right? Start with creating relationship with the deaf community and then find out how to involve them in what they want. Yeah. And again, ASL interpreter at annual conference, that would be fantastic, right? Do we have deaf people that come to annual conference? I don't know, right? I don't think so. But it might be because we don't have an ASL interpreter, or it might be because other deaf people aren't going, right? But I wonder about reaching out to that one deaf congregation and saying, would you come, right? How could we make it welcoming to you, right? No. It's like I said, it's a growing edge. I think I have the answers. I'm still looking for the answers myself. Learning. There's a lot to learn. Autoimmune diseases. We have a lot of people with long COVID now. We're still trying to figure out what that means. It means different things to different people. So I keep thinking that Anabaptist Disabilities Network should publish an issue, one of our newsletter issues on long COVID, but it seems to be a moving target. It's really hard to know what to say, even at this date. There's a lot of research still being done and a lot that we don't know about it. But it does seem like something we should address in the church. People who are immunocompromised. This was a big issue during COVID. Because people couldn't come to worship, even after vaccines, if you're immunocompromised. And the wearing of masks and how controversial that became, very, very difficult and painful for people who are immunocompromised. I got several calls from people who are immunocompromised who felt hurt by the lack of masking in their church because they felt then they really couldn't go to church, right? If other people weren't masking. So they felt alienated. Chemical sensitivity. So sensitivity to smells, to perfumes. I happen to be one of those people. Yeah, Lynn's raising her hand. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's difficult. My eyes swell. I can't speak. I can't sing when I am around certain scents, certain perfumes. So something to be aware of, something you can do in your church about that is to have a section that is fragrance free for people who are sensitive to perfumes or even scented hairspray or, deodorant or whatever. We do have an area at annual conference now that is fragrance free. Food sensitivities, obviously potlucks, you're going to want to, oh, Lynn, you are muting. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, oftentimes the holidays when we bring in lots of flowers, Christmas, Easter, that is a time if you're sensitive, you may decide not to come to church because you simply can't breathe when you're there. I actually had to stand outside the church, come in to pray, and leave the church because it was that bad.
Yes, lilies. Lots of people are very allergic to lilies and hyacinth, right? Hyacinth is a very strong scent. Yes. Again, things to be aware of. Food sensitivities, potlucks. Yep, it adds another layer, I know, but label your food, right? Some people can't eat gluten, some people can't have dairy, right? You want to make sure that people know what they're eating. You want to make sure you have food for them, right? Neurodivergence, intellectual disability, autism, ADHD, mental illness, PTSD. There's a lot going on this slide. And even within those individual designations, there's a lot going on within them, right? We want to be welcoming communities to people who are neurodivergent. I feel like this might be one of the most challenging things because it really involves relationship and taking time to get to know people who might think differently, who might act differently, who might relate to other people differently. It takes time to create relationship.
Where would traumatic brain injury fall into that?
Oh, I think it just is its own category, probably, because there's lots of different people can respond with traumatic brain injury in various ways, right? It can affect people in different ways, right? Also, we might put dementia under this as well, right? I'm going to talk a little bit more about autism. Autism spectrum, you might have heard people say they're on the autism spectrum. We used to think of autism as I'm going to try to do my hands the right way, it's backwards. Right, a spectrum like linear, right? High functioning, low functioning. People with autism are rejecting those labels now. Adults with autism are saying, no, it's really not this spectrum, this linear spectrum, low functioning, high functioning. It's the autism spectrum is this wheel. So you might be functioning differently on these different categories, right? So in terms of perception, you might be out here, executive function, not so great. Sensory issues, oh, you have a ton of sensory issues, right? And maybe don't speak, right? Or maybe you got great language skills. Maybe you talk too much. So in other words, it's a constellation of things, right? Not this linear high functioning, low functioning label. Intellectual disability, some people who are autistic are intellectually disabled, some are not. There is a wide range of ability. So autism affects different people differently. Did you have something to say?
I did, and then I answered my own question and was going to lower my hand.
Okay. So on the autism spectrum is still language that people commonly use, but that language is changing all the time. And in general, autistic people prefer autistic person, identity first language, autistic person. I am autistic, right? She is autistic, an autistic person, rather than person with autism, person who has autism, person on the autism spectrum, especially because spectrum is so ambiguous. What does that mean, right? If we've jettisoned the terms high functioning and low functioning. Some accommodations that you can make for people who are neurodivergent. Some people have hyperacusis. You can use noise reducing headphones for that. Some people are sensitive to noise. There's one congregation where there's a young woman who's autistic and intellectually disabled, and she can't stand the sound of applause. So the congregation has learned now they do applause. This is sign language for applause. So the whole congregation uses sign language for applause now. Right. Now, problematic because they have another young woman in the congregation who is blind. So somebody next to her has to tell her they're applauding, right? But we balance out our needs and we figure it out as best we can, right? To include everybody. Fidgets, little things, you can put a basket of fidgets out in your narthex for people to take just to move with their hands, right? I had a Sunday school class and brought some fidgets in because we had some neurodivergent youth in the class. And I thought, well, this would be great for them to use one of these. And I put that basket of fidgets out and all the neurotypical kids to grab them too, right? It made them all feel better to be playing with something with their hands. And rather than being a distraction, it can help people focus, right? So there's this great new Bible, New International Reader's Version, which is written at a 3rd grade level. So if you have someone who is a low reader and you want them to be able to read scripture, this is a great translation for that. Yeah. We just actually, Anabaptist Disabilities Network just published an accessible Anabaptist membership curriculum. And that also is written at a 3rd grade level. But it's for adults, youth and adults, and it's illustrated. And we are taking sections out of that now and publishing them as individual Bible studies for use with people who are low readers. Or anyone, really, anyone could use it. People are reading less and less. The amount of people that want to read a whole lot of text these days is diminishing. I'm going to talk a little bit about language for disability. So direct language versus euphemistic language. So you might have heard differently abled, or I'm trying to think of some other things. Special needs. Trying to think of other euphemistic language in general. So I'll just say that Anabaptist Disabilities Network, my organization, defaults to what disabled people themselves prefer. So in general, and I say in general because people who are disabled are not a monolith, right? They themselves have different opinions. But in general, people with disabilities prefer direct language. So I'm disabled. I have a disability, right? I'm disabled. Rather than I'm differently abled or special needs or whatever other kind of euphemistic language you want to use.
As someone who is disabled, the wording like I am disabled or I have a disability, because it is recognizable in most people's brains, like they know, oh, a disability, vaguely what that means. It means sometimes access is allowed. It means sometimes understanding is allowed. Like compassion, like you have a different experience with someone if you say, I am disabled rather than like I have special needs, right? That just doesn't elicit the same respect and understanding and legality of the situation. So yes, and yes.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I had a thought and then it went. Let me see if I can get it back. Yeah, I think it names a reality, right? whether that reality is the fact that you have an impairment, which impairments are real, right? Or that reality names that you have been disabled by your environment, right? Disability is a reality, and disabled people have, by and large, said, no, we need to actually name that, and it's not shameful. That's the other thing. There's like such a thing as disability pride, right? I'm disabled, I'm not ashamed of that. It's part of who I am, right? And it's okay. So claiming that. In general, though, for disabled people, person first language is preferred. So person with cerebral palsy, person with Down syndrome, putting the person first, centering that humanity, right? There are 3 exceptions that I know. It's getting some love over there. There are 3 exceptions. Blind people, a person who is blind, right? Blind people, deaf people prefer deaf, I am deaf, blind, I am blind, and autistic people, rather than person on the spectrum, a person with autism, person who has autism, autistic people, at least autistic advocates, adults who are able now to advocate for themselves, prefer identity first language. I am autistic. And the reason for that, again, is sort of claiming that autism, claiming my brain works differently. And I'm not ashamed of that. It's part of who I am. It's part of my identity. It's not a disease to be treated. I mean, I can have therapy for coping skills, right? But it's not a disease to be treated. It is not something that's going away, right? I am autistic, and that's okay. Now, I will say, again, this is not monolithic. Some autistic people prefer a person with autism. Caregivers, parents, teachers, social service workers, interestingly enough, prefer person first language in general. Autistic people in general prefer identity first language. Those are generalizations. They are not monolithic. But it's interesting. And it's interesting for us to navigate that as an organization when we're dealing with parents, right? And in general, yeah, I mean, always, you should use the language that people prefer. Ask them, right? How would you prefer me to talk to you about your own person, right? And of course, calling people by their name is always best. Right? So, yeah. Any questions or comments or concerns about the language thing? We do, by the way, at Anabaptist Disabilities Network, we publish a language guide. Those things are changing all the time, right? And again, different people prefer different terms, but we do have a language guide if you're interested to download. Okay, moving on. Okay, so that last section was all about inclusion and access, right? But belonging is more than inclusion, right? Belonging is more than just being allowed in the door. You can have access to a gathering or space or community and still not feel like you belong, right? So let's talk a little bit about belonging. I'm going to stop my share here. What does it mean to belong?
To
I think to be
feel,
given the opportunity to use your gifts. I'm sorry, I'm
no, it was almost exactly what I was going to say. To feel as though you are needed as a part of the group.
So I heard Lynn say to have an opportunity to use your gifts, and M say to feel like you are needed in the group. How do you know you belong?
When you're included in the group text message.
You're included in the group text message. You're in the loop, right? Even if it's not even if it's not via text message, right? You know what's going on.
And when things don't happen without you.
Things don't happen without you, right? Oh, there was a gathering, but you didn't know about it. Yep.
I think the word feeling is important here for the one that is needing to be included, is to feel that inclusion, even if some of the other people's actions are misinterpreted. I think it's important to make sure that they understand and that they can feel that inclusion.
So it's important to feel included. Mm-hmm.
When you get to be part of the decision-making process.
Yes, you're part of the decision-making process.
I was just going to say that because, like I said, I do have someone in my church, and it's in my youth. And so when we have youth Sunday school, or I'm planning a youth service, to make sure that, like they have all said, that they feel that they're being heard, they feel that they're a part of the group, they feel that the participation that they are involved in, and what they have to give to that service and to the class. So, and knowing that they may not be at the same level, instead of knowing if something's coming up, like, because we study the Bible, if something's coming up that I know in my heart that they are not up to that part of it, I don't say it the way it would be said to the whole group. I say it so that it's said that person understands also. So when you had said about that Bible, that really caught my eye. I had purchased for the whole class a similar but a lower level, particularly for these circumstances, so that they could be a part of everything. And I did it for the whole class, not just one.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Dawn. That just prompts me for some reason to talk about universal design. So what Dawn did was buy that Bible for the whole class, right? And that's universal design, which is not just responding to a particular need, but setting up the classroom so that anybody can access that lesson, right? Anybody can read that Bible. All the readers in her class are able to read from that Bible. So that's universal design.
I have a question. We have some new people coming to our church, and they're there every Sunday now. And what's a good question? How do I word the question to them about, do you now feel you belong? and I'm not sure that's the right way to say it. Is there a better way to check to see if what they're feeling?
Yeah, that's a good question. And these are, oh, Anton, do you have an answer? Okay.
Well, as you said, it's helpful to ask. And so one approach might be, Philip, is to say, is there anything we can do that would help you feel like you belong more than you do now? Or is there anything that you can help us do that will help you feel like you belong?
Yeah, that definitely puts I like that ending because it puts the onus on you, right? Back on yourself, right? What can we do to,
They haven't raised the question of feeling that they belong or they don't belong. You see,
mhm.
I'm just sort of saying, kind of sensing where are they in this journey that they've started with us, and without asking some kind of a question that's embarrassing.
Yeah. I think maybe even just saying, how's it going? We're enjoying you hanging out with us. How are you enjoying it? Right?
Mhm.
Something very general. Yeah.
Yeah, or even saying, we hope that you feel like you belong here. Is that going well?
Mhm. Yeah. So the goal is
Now,
to help them feel that they belong.
we have the same, we have ones that have been coming for a while. And the way I approached it is I also ask, you've been coming for a while. We welcome you here. Would you like to be put in our care groups?
Mm.
That way
What are
I'm not,
care groups?
it's deacons, the deacons care groups.
Got it. Just different terminology.
Yeah. So,
So that's like a marker of belonging, right?
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And some will ask, well, what exactly is that? And we'll say, well, they keep up with you, if anything's going on, follow up with you. So that's the part. If you're not in church, they may call you, say, hey, is everything okay? That's how we started it out.
I feel some pressure from others to ask them to join the church, to become members, which I don't feel that I'm quite ready to ask that yet.
Mm-hmm.
But there is that pressure to say you got to get them to become members.
Mm.
Like,
And see, you have that in a lot of it was in mine too. And I'm like, I don't want them to feel that they don't need to be cared for just to be a member. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I know, membership and stuff, but there are people that come to church, they want to worship and they do want to be cared for. But that idea of membership scares them. It's like, what is my responsibility then to this church if I become a member? Am I going to be asked to do this and asked to do that? And I feel I'm like him. I feel that you should be able to allow them the space that they need and just offer involvement, like I did with the deacon care group, ask them if they would like to be in a group, the deacon care group. If you have an event at the church, we'd love to see you come, or things like that. I feel sometimes membership does push a person away when you walk up to them right away. Hey, you want to become a member of the church? This is what it entails.
Yeah, it's a commitment, right? It's and so I mean, you're talking about joining the care
Yes.
groups as another sort of marker of belonging, right? And then joining the church would be yet another level of belonging. And maybe they're just figuring it out, right? I think we need to allow in our communities also different concepts of what it means to belong, right? Different, not everybody wants to be in the middle of everything, right? Some people are lurkers. Some people like to, you know, be at the margins and sit in the back. Some people like to be in front, right? And they want to be called to leadership and they want to get involved in everything. So we need all of those people. We need the lurkers and, you know, we need the others. So now that said, there might be somebody lurking who wants to be a leader. So I don't want to, I don't want to say you should never ask them. Sometimes they're just waiting to be asked, right? But that takes, it's a slow process, right? Of getting to know people over time. So,
I try to find everybody's gift and then make them use that gift. So like we have one guy who knows a lot about cars and he puts an auto tip in our newsletter every month.
awesome.
Another guy who tells jokes has a joke column.
Very
So
good.
everybody gets included. I just have to figure out what you're good at.
That is awesome. And that's something called gifts-based or person-centered gifts discernment, right? So instead of like in our communities having a list of roles that you have to fill, right? Look at that person and say, what are their gifts? And then, you know, what are everybody else's gifts? And then what can we do collectively with our gifts, right? I mean, not that we don't have some things that we need to get done. We do. That's true. But in general, person-centered gifts discernment is a good way to go to include everyone. Love
I
it.
think the membership gets pushed sometimes because the churches are a dying breed. And I think so membership gets pushed, you know, and they want the younger generation. And it's like, oh, if they come into the church, let's get on top of them. We need them, you know, they're our next generation. Come on, let's go, you know.
Yeah.
That kind of pushes away then instead of, you know, because as soon as they learn, and even if they have a gift and if they find out what that gift is right away, well, now they want to pounce on it, you know, well, we could have you do this, we could have you. And I think that kind of, you know, pushes away sometimes. It depends on, like you said, the personality, the person of they are. And the only way to find that out is to give them space and talk to them and listen and see, you know, where they are actually. And I think that's the congregational's responsibility as long as with the pastor, you know, to feel out who they are and what are they looking for. And so
I think it's a difficult time, Dawn, that you name, right, that we're in, that
yes,
churches are getting smaller. It's getting harder and harder to do church as we have done it, right? So, yeah, but I agree with you. I don't think the answer can be that we need to grab those new people and make them do the things that we've always done, right? I don't think that's going to be a successful model. But it involves a lot of letting go, right? Of you know, how we think we need to do the church and re-envisioning how we do it. It's challenging.
Just to say, our church has put in a chairlift to get people in the church, and 2 or 3 people use it every week. But there's no access to the bathroom because it's downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
And the men's room is on the far end of the basement. And so we're halfway there as far as to make it easy for disabled folks to get into our church. But for a couple of them especially, they could not get to the bathroom if they needed to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a problem. It's challenging because remodeling is expensive, right? Yeah, I know. Okay, so another it's another little plug for ADN, and this is small. I know this is a small amount of money, but if you have any project that you want to do in your church to increase your accessibility, it can be anything. It could be, some kind of remodeling, putting in a push button door, remodeling your bathroom, whatever. We have a barrier-free grant. It's a $500 matching grant. So any congregation can apply for that. I know $500 for a remodeling project is a small amount, but it's not nothing. So depending on the project, it could be helpful to you. Any other thoughts here about belonging? Okay. Anton, is it time for our break yet?
Yeah, actually, it's a really good time. We're at 5 minutes till the hour, so why don't we take another 5-minute break, and then we'll have an hour left, Jeanne, for you to both present the rest of the stuff you have and to wrap it up.
Okay, we'll talk more about belonging and the relational model of disability when we get back.
Okay, come back at the top of the hour. And friends, we're back. So Jeanne, back to you.
Home stretch here. How's everybody doing? Hanging in there? All right. Here we go. Let me share my screen here. All right. So here's a third model of disability. There are many different kinds of models of disabilities, and this one I think particularly applies to the church because relationships should be our superpower. This is what we should do well, right? So there's a relational model of disability, and to use our man by the pool of Bethesda as an example, the problem for the man, the reason he can't get to the pool is not just because he is physically impaired, not only because it's a poor model for a healing pool, but also because he doesn't have anyone to help him, which he names in the story. So he was lying there for 38 years and he didn't make a friend. In 38 years, there was no one to help him get to the pool. So a problem there is the lack of relationships. Unlike the man who's lowered through the roof, remember the story, the man who's lowered through the roof by his 4 friends to Jesus to be healed, right? This man by the pool has no friends. And maybe he just became that guy that sits by the pool, right? Like the guy who's on the corner, right? He just lives there. He gets used to being there. We get used to seeing him there, right? People with disabilities, especially intellectual disabilities and autism, have impoverished social networks. This can happen too with dementia, right? Friends fall away because they don't know how to interact. So people with intellectual disabilities often just have relationships with their caregivers, with their parents, with their therapists, with their teachers, but few social relationships. So some churches have actually started working their social networks to try to get employment for people with intellectual disabilities, right? Because most of us get our jobs because we knew somebody who knew somebody. Most of us got our first jobs that way, right? So we work our social networks in order to create the life that we want. So some churches have started forming little support circles to help people with intellectual disabilities create the life that they want, and to be employed by the using the social networks of friends in the church. Eric Carter is professor of special education at Baylor University. He has a whole center now at Baylor on for intellectual and developmental disabilities. And he has done a lot of work on disability and the church in front of his name. Eric, there you go. Eric Carter. This is his work. So this is his model of moving from exclusion to belonging. And in exclusion, you say, well, you know, we don't really have anybody in our church that is disabled. And he's particularly talking about intellectual disabilities, right? There's nobody here like that. Then segregation here, that is, well, we have a program for people with special needs on Wednesday night, right? So they come in on Wednesday night and we provide space for them, right, to be here. Or we even have a program, right, for them. We host a program. Integration, they're here in the same space, right? Maybe not necessarily in the room, but they're here at the same time, right? And maybe even they're present in worship with us. Inclusion, they're here, they're present in worship with us, they're present in the life of the church with us, and they are using their gifts somehow. So they're leading and they're using their gifts in other ways for the life of the church. And then this last one, belonging, is they're here, they're present, they're using their gifts, they're leading, they're an essential part of our community. But also you see all these little clusters outside the church. They're meeting with people outside the church for coffee, for lunch, to go bowling, for pizza, go see a movie, you know. They have friends. They would be missed if they were gone. This is one of the things that Eric Carter says. You know you belong if you'd be missed if you were gone. Your friends would miss you. They would notice that you're not there. So that is belonging. His model, one of his models of belonging. And he's done some further study and research with his graduate students. And here are the 10 dimensions of belonging that they identified. In order to belong, you have to be present. Seems obvious, right? You need to be there. You also need to be invited. Somebody asked you to be there. Somebody wants you to be there. Welcomed. Once you get in the door, then you are welcomed. Known. Somebody has taken the time to get to know you. So they know what you like, they know what you don't like, they know, you know, things about you. Accepted. So not only are you known, but you're accepted for how you are and who you are. You're supported. You are cared for. You're befriended. You're needed. Needed is a big one, I think. Who is it that said gifts employed? Gifts used. Was that Linda? No, that was Lynn. Yep. And loved. So these are the 10 dimensions of belonging identified by Eric and his students. So I want to tell you a little story about belonging and relationship. There's a story about a friend of mine who is a professional woman, older woman, and has developed a little age-related impairment, mobility impairment, as she's grown older. And one time she was working in the kitchen, and as she was serving in the kitchen, another woman said to her, "You know, I really think it would be okay if you left. You could probably go home, because I think we could move faster without you, honestly." She was terribly hurt by that and has not volunteered in the kitchen since then, and has not really volunteered for anything since then. Which is a loss not only for her, but for her community. We must prioritize relationship over productivity or efficiency. I know that we have less people to get things done. I know we're trying to get things done efficiently and in a timely manner, but we can't have that ever be a priority over relationship. We have to slow down. We have to make time. We have to make space for everybody. I used to have a little new church start called Parables Community, which was for people with intellectual disabilities and autism and their families. And these were folks for whom a typical worship service just really didn't work very well, because it requires you to sit still and be quiet. So what we did was kind of open up the social norms, and as long as no one got hurt, you could just kind of let it all hang out and be yourself, right? We also called people into leadership, right, who were disabled. So there was a young man in that group with cerebral palsy. He was not intellectually disabled, but he had cerebral palsy. And he said, when I was growing up in the church, everyone told me, oh, everybody belongs in the church. And I believed that, he said. But as I got older, as I became a teenager, things started to change. And he said, I couldn't drive like the other teenage boys. And so somebody would have to come and pick me up. And I couldn't walk as fast. And so often if we went someplace, the group would walk ahead of me. And it was just easy, he said. It became easy to leave me behind. And so that story really affected me. We want to make sure that no one is left behind, right? Or left out, because we need to move quickly. John Swinton is a professor at Aberdeen University of practical theology. He is a disability ministry scholar, a disability theologian. He used to be a mental health nurse. That was his first career. And he talks about friendship and the importance of friendship. And I really think that is what the healing power of the church is, right? Not miraculous removal of impairments, but friendship, a place to belong, being known, being loved, being accepted, right? Gifts employed, being honored for your whole person. For him, the most central verse is his favorite verse is this, I don't call you servants any longer, but I have called you friends, Jesus at the Last Supper, naming the disciples as friends. And how we are called to befriend other people, and like Jesus, to befriend other people, not on the basis of affinity, right? Jesus didn't just choose people who were like him, who looked like him, who acted like him, who believed like him, to befriend. He picked people who were very, very different, people who are outcasts, right? A really disparate motley crew to befriend, and modeling for us, right? What the church is to be, pulling in all of these people, right? So when we friend people, it's usually because they like the same things we like, they want to do the same things we do. They make us feel comfortable, right? So we might think about stretching ourselves a little bit, right? Can we stretch ourselves to make friends with people who are not like us? Mia Mingus is a disability advocate. She is not Christian. She's not a religious, but she is a disability advocate. She herself is disabled, and she talks about something called access intimacy. And access intimacy is when someone knows her well enough that they know in walking into any given situation what she needs. She doesn't always have to spell it out. She doesn't always have to articulate exactly what she needs because people know, right? And I would add also, it's important to know what people don't need, right? So access intimacy is something that comes over a long time of getting to know someone, of paying attention and listening and being a friend. So how do we create relationship? Another question for us to talk about here. Stop my share. Anton?
I'd like to read what Eric posted in the chat since he doesn't have a mic and camera.
Oh, thank you.
He had shared earlier that they were beginning to look for a lift just to help people get to the stage in their sanctuary, which is only 3 steps, but it's something that would bypass those 3 steps. But more importantly, he raised this question. He says, I realize we are talking about the inclusion of people with disabilities today, but I can't help thinking that we might have a difference of ideas about what the church is supposed to be. Are we attempting to make the church into an organization that meets the requirement of what we presently feel we happen to need? For example, are we wanting the church to be a friendship organization for lonely people when its intended purpose is to be something else?
An interesting question. There's a lot to unpack there. I'm going to look at the question so that I can read it because there was a lot.
And Jeanne, the question isn't just for you, it's for all of us to wrestle with. So, you can use the presenter trick of saying, what do you all think about that?
I just want to think about it for just a minute because there's a lot in the question. I mean, really, we're talking about what is the mission of the church, right? As the fundamental question. What is the mission of the church?
Yeah, and I think part of where we could get tripped up is confusing the goal of being welcoming and inclusion with the goal of the church, because the goal, in my mind, of being able to be accessible is to allow all people to come to be a part of what the church's mission is. The goal is not to simply create an accessible organization, if that makes sense.
It's posted from Ecclesiastes, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Again, if 2 lie together, they keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, 2 will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. Thank you,
And Eric, you posted bingo, and we're not sure if that was in response to what M wrote or something else in the conversation. So you might want to clarify that.
I'll just say when we include, oh, nice summary of what, yeah, okay. I think when we include as many members as possible, as many diverse members as possible in the church, then we more fully realize the body of Christ. Then we're more able to function fully as the body of Christ. So we do need the lonely people. We need the lonely people. We need the broken people. We need the people who are struggling. And we need the people who honestly, could get by fine without us, right? I was at a disability ministry conference, and there was a deaf rabbi there who said, you don't build a ramp up to the chancel, or up to the bema for him, or up to the chancel, or get an ASL interpreter for us, because actually we're fine. You do it for you because you need us, right? You need us to be whole. You need what we have to contribute to your community. So I would say we need that the goal is to include as many people as possible, to build a church based on universal design, right? To build communities based on universal design that are accessible to everyone, to the most people as possible, in order to realize the fullness of the body of Christ. That's my theological underlying assumption. I don't know if someone has more to say about that subject.
I was thinking of an example again of my son, our older son with hemophilia. First time that he had to go to school in a wheelchair because of bleeding in his knees, or I think that's what it was. He did not want to do that. He didn't want to be seen in a wheelchair, and he was so embarrassed. And we said, well, let's talk to the teacher about that. The teacher had already talked a little bit to the class and enthused got the enthusiasm going in the class that they could hardly wait to help push Carl around in his wheelchair to where he needed to go. And he was the most popular young man in first grade that that year. And there was he and one other handicapped child in there. Of course, he wasn't always in the wheelchair, but sometimes on crutches. And the teacher made a huge difference. And his kindergarten teacher was the same way. And uh, and they had a girl with cerebral
Palsy.
yeah.
Mhm.
And she was, very bright, and they fixed it up so she had a little typewriter to communicate with, and but I think that makes such a difference in their feeling a part of what's going on around them and feeling comfortable in that setting. And I think that's true of the elderly when we have a situation now where a woman with a little bit of dementia, but she has broken her hip, and that is healed, but she's resisting help when she needs it. And because she's been so independent. And we have some people in the congregation that will take these ladies out to lunch on Sunday, 2 or 3 of them at a time, and keep them in fellowship with each other. And I think that is an important part of that ministry, even though it's kind of subtle and doesn't take a lot of training, but it's working and helping.
Thanks, Sharon. I just wanted to say that the teacher in that story about your son is a great example of what leadership can do, right? To make to create belonging, right?
Yeah.
Instead of making the wheelchair something different or odd or strange or scary, right? Which the teacher
Right.
could have done just by her attitude, even non-verbally, right?
Yes.
She made it something engaging and fun and,
That
set the tone for the children to enjoy interaction. Yeah.
that was true of his first 3, 4 teachers. Then when we moved to a different town, the teacher didn't know how to handle that. We told them ahead of time what his problems were because he needed to be watched on the playground. but uh, but there was a couple of teachers he had later that were not helpful. And I was so thankful for the other background that helped keep him encouraged. And we could refer back to that as we counseled him when he was hurt over and angry over the teacher's um, classroom attention to his disability. Yeah. Yeah.
Anton?
I'm going to circle back, Jeanne, because one of the biggest takeaways I'm going to have from this course is that really concisely well-worded theological statement you made in response to the question of Eric, because it made me reflect on where I was with a previous congregation where we were trying to put in a $60,000 accessibility lift to get to the fellowship hall. And people kept framing it as this is something we need to do for those few individuals that can't make it there. And it is a really important shift to say, no, we need to do it for us so that we can be complete as the body of Christ and because we need their participation with us. And that changes the whole conversation with what it means to try to work towards accessibility. It's not just helping a few, poor hurting individuals or whatever. And I am being sarcastic when I'm using that demeaning language. It really is about what it means to be the body of Christ and together and how we claim the vision of a united humanity. And that I didn't want that to escape because that's really important as I continue to frame accessibility conversations in whatever place I happen to be. That's something I'm going to take away with me.
Anton. All right. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint here. And we'll talk about relationship. So John Swinton, a professor at Aberdeen University, disability scholar, talks about a theologian, Koyama I have his book here somewhere. Koyama. I think it's Kosuke. Anyway, Christian theologian who talks about the 3 mile an hour God. He wrote a book about this. And he said, because Jesus, when he ministered to people and preached and taught and healed, he walked from town to town to town on the dusty back roads of Galilee and beyond. And because Jesus is God, we know that God has a speed. And we know what that speed is. It is slow. 3 miles per hour. And John Swinton is a mental health nurse, former mental health nurse, and he was talking with a doctor and telling him this story. And the doctor said, I could not possibly move at 3 miles per hour because my profession means, my job means I have to move at 10 miles an hour. And he said, well, if Jesus is moving at 3 miles an hour and you are moving at 10 miles an hour, who are you following? One of the gifts that people with disabilities give us is the gift of slowing down. Love takes time. Relationships take time. Building a friendship takes time. And it takes attention and intention over time. I'm going to talk about a series of things that we can do to create relationship, and one is to check our assumptions about people. I'm going to tell a little story on myself. When I was going to a disability ministry conference, there was a man who was there who was in a motorized wheelchair and had short limbs and had a couple of caregivers with him. And so he had some significant physical impairments. And I was at the conference. It was the first time I'd been at this conference, and I thought, I wonder why this man is here. And I wonder if his caregivers are attending this conference and like they brought him because they were wanting to attend the conference. And so he's just kind of along for the ride. And the keynote speaker was talking about not being patronizing towards adults with intellectual disabilities. So in other words, treat adults with intellectual disabilities like adults. They're not children, right? Don't be patronizing. So during this keynote, the man who was using the wheelchair had a question. And they brought him the microphone. And he said, I am a pastor of a congregation of people with intellectual disabilities. And I was using Mr. Potato Head as an illustration for the body of Christ. And I wondered if that was patronizing. And I thought, I felt like a complete idiot, Mrs. Potato Head, right? Because I made assumptions. I was like, oh, he's a pastor, right? But I had made assumptions about his abilities and about his intellectual ability because of his body. So it's important to check our assumptions. A lot of times when people are nonverbal, there can be a lot going on up there, even though they're not speaking, right? There's still a lot, they're still thinking, right? They're still hearing, they're still perceiving. Like Anne, the blogger I talked about earlier, Anne Hamlin, right? Still thinking really interesting thoughts, right? She's very smart. She just can't speak. So when we meet someone, we always want to presume intelligence and check our assumptions. Get to know somebody first before you make assumptions about them. Presume competence. A couple stories about presuming competence from my parables community days. So I always try to, like find gifts, like figure out the gifts of people and have them contribute in whatever way they could to the community. And there was a girl who attended who was probably, I think, about 12, very slight and frail because she couldn't eat. She only used a feeding tube. And her mom suggested to me one day, I think she would like to help clean up afterwards. And we used to set out tables, round tables and chairs. So one of our jobs was to put those things away. And so she wanted to help put the chairs away. She was just this little slip of the thing. Now, I have a picture of the chair racks, those chair racks where you have to fold the chair and put the chair up above your head, right? And this little tiny thing was like, bam, 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 putting putting those chairs up on that rack one by one. I was like, look at them go, right? I never would have imagined that she could do that. And another time, another example, there was a little boy. I think at this point he was probably about 7. And he couldn't read. But or he couldn't read well. But I thought that he might like to read a poem in worship. I gave him a really simple Langston Hughes poem. And I said, would you like to read this poem in worship? I asked his mom if that'd be okay. And I thought they can read it over and over again until he pretty much has it memorized. Like he can read it by having read it so many times, right? That he could read it aloud in worship. That was my assumption, right? And she said that she read the poem to him once and he had it memorized. Can't read. Not dumb, right? He knew that poem by memory in one reading and recited it in worship. So again, check our assumptions, presume competence. We don't know what people are capable of, right? And we don't want to limit them by our assumptions. All right, this is a little song. So Anne Hamlin, the blogger I was telling you about, she's autistic and non-speaking. She also writes songs. And this is a song that she wrote. One of her caregivers recorded the song, played the song and recorded it for her, sang it for her. So this is Anne's song called I Am Here. See if I can find where's the little switch to play it? I'll click on it and see. Hopefully it will play. It's a little bit long. So put your patience hat on. There we go.
I see the people walk by me as my one-on-one checks on me. Most ignore me as they talk, laugh, and yell. Some ignore everyone else too. I wonder if they even know I'm here. I am here. Some of them stare at me like I'm putting on a show. I am not sure that my strange mannerisms entertain or bother them, but they do know that I am here. I am here. I am here. I am here. I am here, and I may not be like you, but still I'm here. I am here. The nice lady wearing plaid walks over and talks to my staff, telling her how sweet and dedicated she must be to work with me. It's me, and I am here. I am here. The handsome young man comes over to flirt with my one-on-one. She enjoys this attention as she smiles and giggles, and they both seem to forget I am here. I am here. I am here. I am here. I am here, and I may not be like you, but still I'm here. What they don't know is that I hear and see everything. I am aware of all that goes on, and I smile to myself, and I'm happy to say I am here. I am here. I am here, I am here, I am so happy to be here. Weird mannerisms and all, and it's a joy to be here. Even if they do or don't know, I am here. I am here. I am here. I am here. I am here, and I may not be like you, but still I'm here. I am here. Life is difficult, but I still want to be here, breathing the same air. I'm here for my friends, for my family, and even if you don't know I am here, I am still here for you. Still I'm here. Interesting what you can learn when nobody thinks you're paying attention. Hearing some of your secrets, you have a lot of opinions and thoughts. So do I, as I am here. I am here. I am here. I am here, and I may not be like you, but still I'm here. I am here. I would love to have you hear my opinions and my thoughts. Get past my weird mannerisms, we have a lot in common, as I do know you are here. You are here. My vocal sounds annoy you, I know they annoy me too. Let's get past that and we can enjoy our time together on this beautiful earth. We are here. We are here. You may not be aware of me, now that is okay, because eventually you will know I am here. 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 I am here, and I may not be like you, but still I'm here. I am here. Still I am here. I am here. I am here.
I just love that. Oh, stop.
I
Oh, there we go. I just love that song, and I love her graciousness and her humor in that song. I have a few things left to say, so I'm going to buzz through some slides pretty quickly because we are drawing close to the end of our time together. Just a little talk about normalizing behavior, which is one of the things that teacher, Sharon, did with your son, is normalizing that wheelchair, right? Making it something fun and normal. So this is a story about Abraham Lincoln. Don't know if the story actually happened this way, but I know the story is true. So Abraham Lincoln was giving a dinner party at the White House, white linen tablecloth, fine china, crystal, silver, the whole 9 yards, formal dinner party. And he invited a simple farmer to this dinner party. And after dinner, they served the coffee, and this farmer poured his coffee, get my hands in there, poured his coffee into his saucer and blew on it and sipped it up out of his saucer. What do you think Abraham Lincoln did? I see Sharon mouthing it. Same thing, of course, right? Yes. Did the same thing just to put the farmer at ease and actually everyone around the table at ease, right? We can put everyone at ease by making behavior that is, not typical, but also not harmful, right? Making everyone feel at ease with that. It's okay. We're not just reassuring the person who has the behavior, but also people who are around in the room who might feel, a little anxious about that and not know what to do with those feelings. Here's an example. Donna, Jacob's mammy, has a Facebook page, and she posts these videos of her precocious son, Jacob. And this is Jacob normalizing behavior.
She's in first class. She's not in my class. She's in the other first class. She fell. That's what I done. What? I pretended to fall in front of her. Why? To cheer her up. And I even landed on the back.
He's so adorable. And at 5, Jacob already knows how to normalize behavior, right? His little friend fell, and so he fell, right? And made it something funny and okay.
She's in.
Jeff McNair talks about building social ramps. So instead of expecting people who have poor social skills, people who might be on the autism spectrum or people who are autistic, to make their social skills better, right? They may not be able to do that. So those of us who know how to interact with other people, we can use our gifts, use our skills to help create relationship with them, right? And when we make things more accessible socially, when we put people who are awkward or have difficulty socializing, when we relate to them and put them at ease, we also make everybody else feel at ease, right? It's not just for them, it helps the entire community. Just like wheelchair ramps help people with rolling luggage and strollers, and shopping carts. When we build social ramps into our communities and make it easy for people to relate to one another, right, it benefits everybody. Changing expectations. Jonah Neer on the left was part of Parable's community. He was one of our leaders. He has Down syndrome and he likes to pray. He particularly likes to pray at the beginning of things. So if I asked him for an invocation prayer or to pray before a meal, I would almost always get a yes. But one of the problems with Jonah praying is that Jonah's speech is often not intelligible. You can only catch 1 or 2 words. So that is just a question of changing the expectations and changing the framing, right? And saying, Jonah's not talking to us. Jonah is talking to God. Jonah is interceding on our behalf, and God knows what his intention is, right? So we don't have to understand. We can let him pray on our behalf. So we were blessed, for the entire run of Parables, almost 5 years by Jonah's prayers. The other picture is Eleanor is in the back in the red, and she's blind, and here she is making a pizza in the kitchen, serving in the church kitchen. We can stretch ourselves and develop a tolerance for messiness and the unexpected. It's just a little quick poem. Don't miss out on a blessing because it isn't packaged the way you expected. Expect the unexpected, right? So sometimes, oh gosh, I have a story about this too, but I have no time. Okay. I'm gonna skip that one. Maybe I have time. Nope, I don't. Okay. So life in Christian community, again, the body of Christ, we all have special needs. We all have special gifts, and we function as the body of Christ interdependently. Each one of us is needed. Mia Minga says, I don't just want a seat at the table. I want to build a more magnificent table together. I want to finish by talking a little bit about my organization, Anabaptist Disabilities Network. We serve the Anabaptist Church, Mennonite Church USA, and the Church of the Brethren. In fact, we've just signed an agreement in November to provide disability ministry to the Church of the Brethren as a denomination. We provide consultations. Our staff and field associates will provide consultations to congregations who have a particular concern about an issue of disability or accessibility. We also have congregational accessibility surveys. So if you wanted to fill out a survey for your congregation, we can even help you walk through your congregation to do that. To see in what ways is your congregation accessible and you're doing a great job, and where are your growing edges and where might you want to push into, becoming more accessible in one way or another. I mentioned the $500 barrier-free matching grant. We have webinars and workshops. Our webinars are posted on our website, so you're welcome to go back and look at those. We have some on mental health, on dementia, on welcoming families who have a disabled child. Various topics on membership for adults with intellectual disabilities. We provide accessibility services at conferences. We have a newsletter and a blog. We have books and an accessible Anabaptist Bible studies and membership curriculum, which I mentioned. That's just some of the things that we provide. And I should mention our field associates at the top. When I talked about consultations, I can't know everything about every disability. So we have a team of a dozen people who are experts in one field or another of disability. So they provide consultations and they write for us and do workshops and things on mental health, on dementia, on intellectual disability, whatever. This is our website, AnabaptistDisabilitiesNetwork.org. Please feel free to contact us with any questions that you have or resources that you need. And please feel free to reach out to me. I'm glad for that also. And that is it. Thank you for your attention. Do you have questions for me or comments, or how shall we spend these last 10 minutes together here, or 7 minutes together?
Steve, I saw your hand, and pull your camera down a little bit so we can see your face as you share, if you'd like to share with us. And you're still muted. Do you need help getting unmuted? I'll pop up a thing to help.
I'm there. Now you can hear me, can't you?
Yep.
I really was just waving goodbye. I really didn't have but
okay.
I was applauding and Enton was applauding, and I think it was confusing. Like we were.
I will make one comment. One of my beliefs is that I expect to get as much out of every relationship as I bring to the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I like that attitude, I think it's not patronizing, that if we expect to gain as much as we give, we affirm the gifts and talents of the people we're interacting with.
Thank you. Yeah, that mutuality is important, right? Yeah.
Way earlier, you talked about necklaces that work with hearing aids.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
Is there some kind of resource about that on your website that I can look into those? Like, how much do those cost?
There's not a specific brand of those, but yeah, they're like loops and they have a little receiver.
Yeah, to do like and our big loop is broken
Oh, okay.
and we can't afford to fix it.
Mhm.
So I was wondering if having a few of those for the folks who have hearing aids would be helpful.
What are you using now? Are you using anything? Oh, yeah, you would need some kind of transmitter, so.
I
but
mean,
maybe the frequency-
we have microphones that transmit down, and there are different things, like we can figure that out. But like the actual devices would they hook up to a computer?
Well, they would hook up to hook up to a transmitter. So you need a transmitter in order for them to receive.
Okay, we do have one transmitter, and I'm sure it could handle more than one thing.
Yeah.
So,
I can be in touch with you about that.
I think I want to be in touch with you about a lot of things, actually.
Okay, just send me an email and we'll
Yeah.
talk. I should drop my email in the chat here. Let me drop that in here.
Oh, my mom says hello, by the way.
Hello to your mom.
When there was the timing issue, I called her asking for your number, and she was like, I don't know if I have it or not, but say hi.
Please give her my love.
And thanks for sharing your email, Jeanne. Are there other questions, other thoughts as we get close to the end? Philip, I see you unmuted.
If I can get a little clarification on that wheel that you showed,
Yeah,
and you had the word invite on there.
yeah.
What about the person who just shows up, who's not invited? Can they get to the same end as one who is?
Sure. That's just a first step, is being invited. Yeah. But yeah, certainly if the person has come of their own volition, yes.
That'd be the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Linda, you're welcome. She said, thank you for sharing the thought about Godspeed. I love that.
This was wonderful. I've really enjoyed this morning and your presentation. That song was great. Now, was it the girl that wrote it that sang?
No, she's
That
not
was someone
speaking.
else that
Yeah.
sang.
Her caregiver sang and played it and recorded it. Yeah.
Oh, that was just really special.
But she wrote the words.
Yes, that's
Mhm.
wonderful.
My favorite part of that song is her saying, well, it's funny when she talks about listening to other people's secrets. But also when she says, even though you don't know I'm here, I'm still here for you.
Yes.
Such a generous
Is there a
spirit.
way of you sharing that to us?
Yeah. Yes, hang on just a second. Let me see if I can do that quickly.
Honestly, it would be really cool to have your whole PowerPoint. Like, there were so many good images in there, but I don't know if that's something you'd be willing to share.
Maybe, let me think about that. I'm trying to get a link here.
Jeanne, is the song on YouTube or?
It is, but I'm not sure where to find it. I have it posted on our website.
I
So that's
might
the
be able to
link.
find it while you're fielding other questions. We've got time for just
Okay.
one or two last questions.
Sure. Yep.
I mean, this one might be relevant to more than just me. What do you think might be a way to deal with a lot of walkers and rollators?
Ask me that again.
So our congregation, mostly older, tons of walkers and rollators.
Mhm.
what would be a good way to stop them from like being a hazard if someone needs to get out quickly?
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Interesting. I don't know. I'd have to see your space, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to like in my thinking about it, I'm wondering if taking out like taking some of the pews out because we don't have enough, like they're not all full, so that there could be room in the pew for the rollators.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
it's something that's been on my mind so much lately.
I
Mhm.
work in a long-term care facility, and what we've done in our auditorium is spaced the rows so that people can bring their walkers to their
Yeah.
chairs with them.
Yeah.
Now, you're talking about pews. Yes, you may need to take out pews or cut the ends off of a couple just to make the space. And as far as being able to get out quickly, yes, it's good if they have them with them. Otherwise, a suggestion would be to make a parking garage. If there would be a volunteer, like an usher, who would be willing, once someone is seated, to move the walkers to the side. And that's something we've done in our dining room to make it safe for our servers, so we don't have walkers everywhere.
Thanks, Lynn.
So I've put the link to the Amy Hamlin song in the chat, but I'll also send it in your wrap-up email so you don't have to quickly grab it now.
Yeah, I put one in there too, Enton, so they have it twice.
That's great. I love it.
I don't see, Jeanne, where you posted. So did you hit enter yet?
Yep, it's right above yours.
Ah, got it. Okay. Well, we're now at the end of our course, and so I want to draw things to a conclusion and say thank you to those of you who were able to make it and for your high level of participation. And as a way of wrapping this all up, Jeanne, I want to send it back to you to have our last thought. Again, remember that Jeanne will stay for a few minutes if people have wrap-up questions that they want to answer. But thank you so much for being part of Ventures, and we look forward to seeing you back for another Ventures course. But Jeanne, send us out.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, for your attention, for your participation. Why don't I send us out with a prayer? Gracious God, you have made us beautiful in our particularity, in our uniqueness. Thank you, God, for the variety of human life and experience. Help us to be loving. Help us to be affirming. Help us to honor each person as the gift that they are to us and to our communities. Bless us all as we go out into the day and into our communities to carry forth the love and the courage of Jesus. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Jeanne. So glad to have you lead us today.
Thank you for the invitation. It was wonderful to be with you all.
Go in peace, friends.